Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Smile. My guest today is Rhiannon Tracey, a motivational speaker, TEDx presenter, and wellness advocate whose story is a true testament to resilience and transformation. After a pool accident left her a quadriplegic just before her 21st birthday, Rhiannon turned her adversity into fuel, becoming a beacon of hope for thousands. She went on to found Australia's first not-for-profit spinal cord injury recovery centre, make history at Melbourne Fashion Week, and inspires audiences worldwide with her message of living with purpose and joy. After years of hustling, healing, and breaking barriers, Rhiannon now embraces a slower, more intentional lifestyle, one rooted in simple joys and everyday rituals. When she's not speaking on stages or advocating for inclusion, you'll find her baking in her kitchen, tending to her garden, raising her beloved chickens, and creating a little oasis of nourishment and growth on the surf coast of Victoria. Now, I came across Rhiannon on social media and my inner voice just told me I absolutely had to ask her onto the show. So I'm so excited for this conversation today. And with that, Rhiannon, welcome to Behind the Smile. How are you today?
I'm so good. I'm so glad we connected.
I know. It's so interesting, isn't it? Sometimes people just come into your orbit for a reason. And I just knew, I don't even know how I came across you, but I was just like, oh, yeah, I love this girl. I love everything that you're about. I love your energy and I love your story as well. So thank you for agreeing to come on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Now, we always kick things off with some nice, easy questions just to allow our audience to get to know you a little better. So, Rhiannon, can we start off with where do you live? What does an average day look like for you? And what do you do for fun?
So I live on the surf coast. So I say Torquay because that's where people kind of know in the area that I live. But it's a little town called Armstrong Creek that's growing rapidly. So just before Torquay here in Victoria. And I don't have average days. I live with a spinal cord injury. So no 2 days look the same. It's very much a wake up and see where the day takes me kind of day. That being said, I do have responsibilities. So, I've got to work, got to pay the bills. And like you said, I have an abundance of animals to take care of. But an average day for me is waking up and really just feeling what the day looks like. And what do I do for fun? Well, I bake, I tend to my garden, I hang out with my people, my village, I like to call them. I'm an only child, so I don't have any siblings. So my family is very much my friendship group.
Wow. And you mentioned when we were chatting offline, you've got a few pets, don't you? I know I mentioned the chickens, but who else have you got there?
2 dogs. I have Dolly. I'm just going to preface this by saying I'm a huge country music fan. So I have Dolly, my golden retriever. I have Cash, my long-haired mini dachshund. Then I have Jolene, my little black cat. And then I have Odie. So I used to have Garfield and Odie, now just Odie. And then
God,
I've
I
got,
love it.
my 4 chickens, Blossom, Marigold, Iris, and Cosmo.
My goodness. I love that so much. Like, that is absolute goals. I keep saying to my husband, I'm like, when are we getting our next dog? Because we just have one at the moment, but my dream is to have like 7.
I'll have all the animals. I just need somewhere to put them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's so good. And is gardening and baking something that you've always loved doing, or is that something that you've grown into?
I did it a lot as a little girl growing up. So I had a grandfather who was a big veggie gardener, and I was raised by a single mum and my grandfather. Yeah, so my grandfather was always in his veggie garden, and I just remember doing like little things with him in the garden. And then my grandmother on my dad's side was a big flower gardener. So the best memories I have of those two were being in the garden. And I think as I've just gotten older, I mean, around COVID time when we had nothing to do, that's when it all kind of started again. And I love it. As a neurodivergent person, it helps me turn my brain off.
Mm.
And I love nothing more than to be able to eat the food that you grow. And my latest is cut flowers. So cutting your own garden flowers and having endless bouquets of flowers around your home.
Oh my goodness, I
It's the
love that.
best.
I love that. It's inspiring. I do not have a green thumb, nor am I a person that you'll find in the kitchen. So when I hear people who are passionate about those sorts of things, I find it so inspiring because to me, it terrifies me. I mean, I'll kill anything. So like, that's amazing.
I just throw seeds around and pray. So
It sounds like my kind of gardening. I love it.
my
So
partner calls
good.
it chaos gardening.
That's brilliant. I'm here for chaos gardening. Oh my goodness. Hey, Rhiannon, I've asked you to bring in a photo today. Now, this is a photo from a time in your life where you are hiding behind a smile. So
Mm.
you were presenting one version of yourself externally, but the reality was you felt very different internally. Could you please describe for our listeners? I'm going to bring the photo up on the screen now, but for those who are perhaps listening and not watching, could you describe what are we looking at here in this photo and what's going on for you at that time in your life?
So this photo in particular was taken at one of my favorite places in the world, and that is Nashville. Like I said, I absolutely love country music. And on this particular trip to Nashville, I had brought my now ex-fiance over to show him my favorite place. We had gotten engaged, I think the week before I took him to Nashville. And this time was, I'm going to say, a huge awakening for me because, as mentioned, we just got engaged, and you would think that that's a time where, you'd be happy, you'd be celebrating,
Mm.
but something just didn't sit right for me. And I think this trip in general, it was a trip that I had funded, and I was generally very excited to show him, like I said, my favorite place. And I felt very, very underappreciated. I felt very taken advantage of. And this trip was when I came to the realization that I was living a lie. And that lie was that I knew that I wasn't being treated the way that I deserved to be treated. I mean, I've been married and divorced, and I could feel myself being pulled back into that same vortex. So
Mm.
I was happy because, I was in my favorite place, but internally, like, I wanted to pull my hair out.
Wow. And Rhiannon, how old were you when this photo was taken?
How old am I now? I'm 36, so I was 34.
So it's a recent photo.
Yes.
And tell me, you described yourself as having the realization that you were living a lie and that it didn't
Mm.
feel in alignment. But what did that actually look and feel like? What were some of the signs?
It was very conflicting for me because I guess this relationship in its whole made me realize that your gut is always right. And it was conflicting because I would have moments where I would think, this has happened and this is how I feel. Oh, but maybe it's a me problem.
Mm.
Because I felt like, things that were coming up were triggers from my past. And because of those triggers, I wasn't actually acknowledging my partner's, or at the time, I wasn't acknowledging his behavior and the things and the way he was making me feel. So, I just kind of rein it in as, it's a me problem, or I'm just making this, more of a deal than what it actually is. So it was very confusing, and it actually took bringing an external party into the situation for me to go, absolutely not. This is not a me thing. This is 100% a him thing. So it was exhausting. If I had to put a word on it, it was exhausting because I felt like I had nothing in my tank after that relationship. If you knew me at the time, like all my friends have told me, like I was a very distant friend, which is not the type of person that I am. I couldn't show up for anyone or anything because I couldn't show up for myself because I was consistently trying to show up for him.
Mm. It's almost like I remember for me when I was at the very end stages of my alcoholism before getting sober, I describe it almost like the sparkle had left my eyes, like the inner essence
Mhm.
that made me had disappeared. Was that kind of similar for you?
Absolutely. My partner now says I lost my bubbles. So,
Yeah.
because when people meet me, and especially in that time that I was in that relationship, people would say that I was the sunshine and he was the thunderstorm. Like that's how people would kind of, yeah, describe us. And it was like, yeah, all my bubbles had been burst and there was just absolutely nothing left.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly draining and exhausting.
Yes.
Can I ask, and this is a bit of a personal question, so feel free to, you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but being that you were already divorced and 34 years of age, was there a part of you that maybe didn't want to see the signs or perhaps was just so desperate to not have another, and I'm going to use air quotes here because I'm also divorced and remarried, but another failed relationship? Do you think that played a part in you staying for as long as you did?
Honestly, no.
Mm.
I think for me, there was a lot happening in the 3, almost 4 years that we were together. We were also about to embark on an IVF journey. He had fertility issues, and I think this was another factor that played into my decision to leave. So, we were about to go through IVF, which was going to be, as it is for an able-bodied woman, it was going to be a lot for my body, but as somebody living with a disability and a chronic illness, it was going to be even more. So I think there was a time where, I want to be a mum. That's like my big dream. I want to be a mum. So I think there was a time where I was like, even if I get a baby out of this, like, I'll be happy.
Mm.
And then as we got closer to starting that journey, I was like, do I want to be raising another child? Because I already felt like I was raising him.
Yeah, literally.
And that's when I just went, absolutely not, because we were at a point where I was doing all these things to prepare myself and my life for this process and this journey, but he was doing nothing. And so I just thought, like, I don't want to, and I deserve better. So I think what I like to say now is being married and divorced gave me the stepping stone I needed to realize that I didn't want to go through that again, that I didn't deserve to go through that again. And I don't think if I didn't have those fundamentals from that first divorce, I honestly don't think I would have had the strength to leave.
I hear you. And how long did it take for you to, I suppose, recover from that relationship, the emotional impact that it had on you, to then think to yourself, okay, I'm ready to be in another relationship?
I don't think that I have recovered, if I'm completely honest. I was very against getting into another relationship. And, from what I had learned and read and spoken to therapists and friends, it was very, very adamant that I would take some time out for myself and just be on my own, because I'm a relationship girl. Like, I don't do short term, I do long term. And, I couldn't really remember a time where I had been single, so I was ready to do that, and I even had conversations with my friends where they said, if you wanted to have a baby, we would support you. If you want to do it on your own, we'll support you. And I love my village. I've got a really amazing group of people behind me. But yeah, the world has a very interesting way of presenting you with things. And like I said, I was very anti getting to another relationship, but my partner who I'm with now just kind of stepped into my orbit, and I had so many walls up. I had to have my village step in and say, this is something good. This is something very different, and maybe you should give it a shot. And I think you can heal with another person. And my partner, he was in a 22-year long marriage, and he's got teenage and adult children. He's a bit older than me, and yeah, he really, I think we came together and we've both helped each other heal in really beautiful ways. And he, it's funny because you hear the old saying, like, women often marry their fathers.
Yes.
And I think that was my case in the past. Like, the person I married to this day, I think, still has a relationship with my father who I don't speak to. And I was about to go down that same track. But like I said earlier, I was raised by my grandfather, and I feel like my grandfather has stepped back into my life because my partner reminds me so much of my grandfather. He's the most beautiful human. We just celebrated our 12-month anniversary our official anniversary. And to this day, we've never had an argument.
Mm.
And I remember growing up and people saying, it's not right, it's wrong to not be, not argue.
Same.
But now I'm like, no, we talk. Like, we sit down and we have conversations, and we have this funny joke where all we've got to do if we're upset or annoyed is just look at each other a certain way, and we actually say to each other, stop yelling at me with your face, instead of like we don't argue. And he's just healed everything within me and my entire, I guess, perception of what relationships look like.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm so happy for you, Rhiannon. I have had the exact same experience with my husband. We've been together for a bit over, I don't know, 3.5 years maybe. We just got married this year. And he says, I refuse to fight with you, because I was raised in a family system that was quite chaotic, and there was a lot of verbal fighting and a lot of dysfunction there. And, that's what I learned. That was the learned behavior. And that's what I thought relationships were meant to look like. And, as a result of that, dated a lot of people where even my ex-husband and I, the fighting was really full on. And then all of a sudden I meet this man and he refused to fight with me. And so after a while I learned that, well, that wasn't going to work. And so then I had to actually rely on really healthy communication as a way to navigate, because the sticky things still come up, don't they? You don't, I think that's the difference. It's not that you're never going to fight, or that it's not that you're never going to disagree. It's just that you can either yell at each other or you can speak and listen as well. That's imperative, right? Actually listen to each other. And then you don't need to have that. I think it's the volatility that is removed when you can have a healthy conversation. So I'm so, so happy that that's been the case for you, and that you've been able to heal whilst in this new relationship as well. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, I think the first 6 months of it was very much, getting past that what is a trigger, what is a me thing, what is a him thing process. And there were lots of conversations very early on. I remember, early on in our relationship, even conversations about finances, like I'd pay for something. There were lots of conversations around, like if we would book dinner or if we'd pay for something and, I'd pay for it, I'd feel like I'd have to make a point of sitting down and saying to him, you need to pay me back or something like that. And I'd feel very anxious about having conversations that shouldn't be hard conversations to have. And he would say to me, like, I would actually say to him, I'd say, I'm very anxious and I hate to bring this up. And before I could even get all the words out of my mouth, he would say, there's no need to be anxious, but I understand why you're anxious, and it's just to have that love and that nurturing. It's just, like I said, I'm sure it's the same with you. In your past, those relationships were exhausting. I'm not exhausted. Yeah. Well, I'm exhausted, but from other things.
Yeah, just life in general. It is true though, isn't it? And being able to be vulnerable, like coming at it from a place of this is how I'm feeling. And also really important, I think that the difference there is it's not that you've made me feel this way. It's just a simple like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And I always say to people, when you meet someone with vulnerability and authenticity, it's very hard for them to turn that around on you or for that to create some sort of conflict. Often people really respond well to the softness and the openness. And it's like, oh, okay, let me meet you there. Let me meet you in your stuff and we can figure this out together. Oh, so, so good. Hey, Rhiannon, you mentioned something before, and I'd love to understand a little bit more about that. Your childhood. So you were raised by your grandparents. Why was that?
So my mum was raised by her grandparents, which were my great-grandparents. My mum was one of 5 kids and she was the oldest. So her family were kind of spread around the country. And then my mum and my biological dad were only together for a few years. So my mum was actually told she'd never have kids and went into her relationship with my dad thinking and believing that she wouldn't be able to conceive. So when that did happen, other things happen. But yes, I've always had a very interesting relationship with my biological father. And just as I was getting divorced, I was about to turn 30, and a lot of things happened in that time that woke me up to realize that, yes, I had married my dad. My dad and my ex-husband were like best mates at this point. And my marriage ended because of things that my husband had done. And my dad actually sided with my husband instead of nurturing me and helping me through, I'd been with my ex-husband on and off since I was like 14. So it was a huge chunk of my life that I had to readjust to not having him in my life. And his best friend was also my best friend's husband. So it was we were very tied together in so many different ways. So when everything went down and I wasn't getting the love and nurturing or the compassion or empathy from my dad, it was enough for me to turn around and say, do you know what? I've done 30 years of this and feeling like I need to fight to have a relationship with you, but you're the parent, And I also had a conversation with my auntie, his sister, who filled me in on the fact that, he never wanted to be a parent, So I think I had lived for 30 years with this expectation of how he should be. But then when someone was telling me, well, he never wanted to have kids, it just completely abolished that expectation and made it so much easier for me to go, that relationship is done. And I've never looked back. I'm about to turn 37, so it'll be 7 years since I have spoken or had any communication with him, and I don't look back.
Wow.
My mum has been married, and I do have a stepdad, which I have, again, an interesting relationship. I kid you not, I have tried every type of AirPod and everything. They do not stay in my ears. So my mum did remarry, and she's not with my stepdad anymore. So, every kind of male relationship that I've had or been exposed to besides my grandfather has been vile or toxic in some way. But yeah, so my mum lived with my grandparents, and I had my grandmother until I was 4 or 5, and then I had my pop until I was, just before I turned 13, he passed away.
Wow.
And it was just my mum, my pop, and I for a very, very long time. And he was the one walking me to school in the morning. Like, my mum worked full time. She was still a single mum. So it was, the memories I have of my pop walking me to school in the morning, and my pop putting me on the tram and taking me to the shopping centre. And, I had the most beautiful relationship with him. And I've said to my mum, I'm like, is it because my memories of being so young are different? Like, was he really that amazing as I can remember? And she was like, yes, like he was.
Wow.
A typical old-fashioned gentleman. He'd been in the war. He absolutely loved my grandmother. He was just beautiful. And yeah, like I said, I see so much of that in Ben, my partner. So it's really beautiful. And yeah, I'm so thankful that I have those memories.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really special that through all of that, you still had a male figure in your life who showed you, how you deserved to be treated, to be cared for and nurtured and to feel safe from such a young age.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, Rhiannon, can we fast forward a little from your childhood, that sort of age of 13 when you lost your pop, to the age of 21? Because just before you turned 21, that's when you had your accident. Can we talk about that day? Do you have any memories from that day, or is it just sort of from when you found out what had happened?
Oh no, I remember the day as if it were yesterday, actually. I was fully conscious throughout having my accident. But yeah, the memories were very, very, very embedded in there. It was a typical day on holiday in Bali. I was there with my mum and my best friend. So my mum and I have been very, very close my whole life. As I said, only child, was mum and I for a long time. But we also have a love-hate relationship. We go through stages where we don't talk. We're currently during that stage right now. But, very, very close. Always we're going on holidays with each other. So in Bali with my mum and my best friend, we had been out and about all day. We'd been on a beautiful cruise that night, and we came back to our hotel. Mum had gone back. Mum had gone to bed, and I dove into the hotel swimming pool like I'd done many, many times before, and just in this instant dove into the wrong spot. So the swimming pool itself the whole pool was a deep pool. There's actually 2 swimming pools. There was a shallow pool and a deep pool with a bit of a walkway over the top. And I dove into the deep pool, but the swimming pool would concave a bit. So when I dove in, I actually didn't dive in far enough into the center, which was the deepest point of the pool. So I hit my head at the bottom and instantly broke my neck and my back and was fully conscious. So, I was face down in the water. Would never have assumed or guessed that I had broken anything. I just felt my body just kind of seize up. And I thought I just hit my head really, really hard, that my body had gone into shock. But it was when I was trying to turn myself around that I, started to freak out and realize something wasn't right. And my best friend and our friends who we were with, they pulled me out of the swimming pool, called my mum. I was taken to the Bali International Medical Center and they did a CT scan there. Said that the fragments of my broken vertebrae were piercing into both sides of my spinal cord. So I'd need to have emergency surgery to have those removed because I was at risk of having my spinal cord completely severed. And so then I was taken to the Denpasar hospital, and while I was waiting for the surgery, Bali was hit with a massive earthquake. So it was a time. It was very much a time. I didn't think that I'd survive the night. I remember just being in absolutely excruciating pain, and somehow I did survive the night and I did have surgery. But, as you can imagine, the medical care you get in Bali is very different to the care that you would get here. So the long and short of it was I'm very, very lucky. I'm very lucky to be alive, not so much because of the accident itself, but more so the medical care I received in Bali. So I was in hospital for 3 weeks in Bali. I did have travel insurance, so that eventually got me home. But while I was waiting to get home, I was declining. The surgery that they had done had failed, or it just wasn't done the right way. There were just lots and lots of issues. Yeah, I was lucky to get back to Australia in one piece, so to say. Then had two more surgeries to correct what Bali had attempted to fix. So I was told I'd never get out of bed again. And if I did, I'd be in an electric chair for the rest of my life. At 20 at the time, it was very devastating, but at the same time, there was no point throughout my journey that I didn't see myself not doing more or not being more than what I was being told. Like even though I had the emotional roller coaster every day, I couldn't envision myself, being in a situation, well, the situation that they had described, being in bed or being in an electric chair. I mean, I still to this day have moments. I even had one last night where I was like, oh, I can't believe I'm in a wheelchair. Like, I'm in a manual wheelchair, but 16 years on, I can take steps and I can do a hell of a lot more than what, was ever predicted for me. But just never thought that would be it for me.
Wow. I'm just listening to your story, Rhiannon. It's incredible that you did survive and that you were able to get home to Australia. Can I ask, because I'm trying to understand, how do they fly you home?
So I was initially meant to come home on just a normal commercial flight. So the medical team in Bali were conversing with our team here in Australia and telling them that the surgery had gone well, everything was fine. I could be put on a plane and brought home. And a doctor and a nurse flew over from Australia to Bali to do that, to come home with me. And when they got there, I was literally taking my last breath. So my lungs had collapsed. Like I said, there were so many things, and they obviously just went into panic mode. We need to get her out of the country. I was transferred to another hospital just to get me well enough because, my lungs had collapsed. I couldn't breathe on my own. I was full of medications. They kept injecting me with things that I was allergic to. There were so many things. So I was 48 hours air ambulanced out of Indonesia to Essendon. Yeah, I just honestly believed that once I got to Australia, I was going to wake up and it was all going to be a bad dream. And the doctors were going to say, no, they've got it wrong. You don't have a spinal cord injury. Like, that is what I believed. So when we got into the hospital and my parents were being told, I need to be put into an induced coma, like I need more surgeries, it was a lot. That was probably the time that was, I guess, the most of a blur, because I was put into an induced coma because my lungs were in such bad shape. They needed they needed to get me well enough to be able to perform these additional surgeries. So yeah, 7 almost 8 months in hospital in total, and that's a very short amount of time for somebody with my injury. The toll of being in the hospital was a lot as well.
Of course, being in that environment for that, like, and just away from your creature comforts, and you were so young as well, Rhiannon. Like, it's just there. I'm really curious to know, do you have moments, or did you ever have moments where you replayed that night in your head and thinking, if only I had just, and how did you work through that? Because that's obviously not helpful at all, is it? But it must be a natural response.
Stopped having those moments years ago because I think that would put me into a state where I would say, what if? Yeah, I would get myself into a state in the first couple of years where I would say, what if? Because also out of my group of friends, like, I wasn't a wild child. I was like the mother hen. I was the one, I never did drugs. I never went out, like, out of my group of friends, I was like, how does this happen for such a long time? And then I stopped because I knew that it was having such an emotional impact on me. So instead of asking what if, I started to say, what's next? Like, what's next for me? And then we just actually got back from Bali about 7 weeks ago. We went back. It was the second time I've been back. So I did go back in 2014 with my mum and my stepdad, and we went to the swimming pool, and we went to the hospital. And that was a bit of a blur because there was a lot happening, and I didn't go back because I wanted to. I went back because I felt like I had to. So it was a very different experience to going back this time, because I went back because I wanted to, and I went with my partner, my best friend, and her hubby. And, we went on the same cruise that I went on the night that I had my accident. We went back, we went to the hotel. And it was at that time, because we sat there and we had dinner, and, we were going to get in the swimming pool and everything like that, but they'd closed the pool for maintenance. So, we sat by the pool and we had dinner, and I just kept staring at the pool. And, my partner, he has a really good way of knowing, like, when my brain's working. And he grabbed my hand and he said, what's up? And I just said, why did I jump where I jumped? Like, why? I cannot believe that I did that, And he said, because you were 20 years old and you were having fun, like, our brains grow, they develop, I was stuck in the moment, and that was it. Like, that was it for me. I've put that to bed because, the life that I have now, as interesting as it is and chaotic as it is, I wouldn't give it up in a heartbeat. Like, so many things, so many beautiful things have come from the experience that I had diving into that swimming pool, that I am 100% certain things would have been so different for me. And I feel very blessed. I'm not sure I believe in the word luck. I think that I have worked very, very hard for the things that I have. But, I look around at my life and the people that are in it, the things that I've done, the things that I've been able to see and do, none of that would have happened, I assume. But I also appreciate things. I have a huge appreciation for the simple things in life. I get a little bit pissy when people don't share that same appreciation, but then I have to kind of rein it in a little bit, because, you don't want people to have to experience a trauma to appreciate the simple things in life. And that's why I became a speaker, because I wanted to share my journey so that could help people understand that, being able to tie your own shoelace or hug your loved ones is something that we so take for granted.
Oh my goodness, without a doubt. I've got to know. This was actually when I knew I was interviewing you today, I was said, I really want to ask Rhiannon this question, and you've just led to it perfectly. So thank you for that. Does it drive you nuts when people sweat the small stuff and complain about the most, what seems would be to you the most ridiculous small things? Like, how do you deal with that?
Yes and no, because I think that one of my superpowers, I like to say, is that I can see things from both sides. I understand both sides of perception. You know, like I said, people who haven't experienced something generally don't see the value in the little things.
Mm.
But I also find that if it's the people within my circle, they'll pull themselves up when they say it before I can say it.
Yes, of
That's
course.
pretty beautiful.
Yeah. And tell me, I imagine this is another one that I feel like could either be something you truly believe in or something that could even be quite insulting when people say everything happens for a reason. How does that make you feel?
Well, I think that is one of the most interesting quotes because I'm on both sides of the fence.
Mm.
I really am. And it's something that, again, like as somebody who is a public speaker and does a lot of motivational talks, I have to be very careful when I do say that out loud. And I think at the beginning of this journey for me, people used to say it to me all the time. And I used to think to myself, oh my God, you're so lucky I'm paralyzed.
Mm.
Because I'd probably come at you like a spider monkey. It's not something you can say to anyone when they're vulnerable. That's
Yeah.
fact. But yes, I think it can be the case if you allow it to be, because I do honestly believe that when things happen in life, you have two options, and it's you can give it all you've got or you can give up. And it's the same with death, is something that is so heartbreaking and it's so sad, but can be so beautiful as well, because again, we often cherish and celebrate a human more when they're not here than what we do when they were here.
Mm.
And that's heartbreaking in itself, but it's the same old, like you want what you can't have and you see the value in something when it's out of reach. So beautiful things can happen from devastating things. I'm a big believer in that. And I think that sounds a lot better than everything happens.
It actually really does. That's a really nice way to reframe that. Thank you for sharing. And Rhiannon, receiving that news at the age of 20, for so many people, that would just be devastating, to the point where, like you just said, they give up. What was it about you? Do you think it was a natural instinct? Is it something that you've had to work at, that resilience that seems to be something that's like a fire within you?
It's really interesting because I look at my athletes in my facility and, the ones that need full-time care and the ones that can't, take care of themselves and, can't do the little things that we spoke about. And I think to myself, I couldn't imagine being that way, but I was in that way. But for what feels like a very short amount of time, but felt like a huge amount of time not so long ago. I don't have an answer to that because I don't know what drove me. Just knew I wanted more. I just knew that if I had a life, I was going to make the most of it. I think back to those early days, like my mum was Jesus for me. Like I'm not religious in any way, but the doctors would tell me something and I would go to mum for further clarification. Like if the doctor said, you're not going to walk again, I would ask mum and she'd be like, of course you are, right? Of course you are. And I would take her word verbatim instead of the doctors. It was wild. My mum is a trailblazer and she's someone that thrives with trauma. Like she absolutely, my mum, when there's chaos, she is the queen. Like she will change the world in a heartbeat. And that's what she does. When there is a chaotic situation, she takes charge and she makes it better. And she did. She is a huge reason in those first kind of 5 years that I was pushed. She pushed me because she wanted more. I was her only child. I think she would, she still to this day still struggles with a lot of guilt because she wasn't there to stop me diving into that swimming pool. So I think a lot of it had to do with her and a lot of it just had to do with, just wanting more. But there wasn't ever a significant moment where I went, I'm going to do this because of this. I just honestly played the cards I was dealt with.
Yeah. And that's led you to create your own not-for-profit. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, I wanted more from my life and I wanted recovery to be an option. And when you have a spinal cord injury, even 16 years later, you're given the stock standard of information, which is you'll probably never walk again. you have limited options. You need to get used to your life being this way. And at 20, that just wasn't okay. Like, that was not okay. It gave me nothing to look forward to. It gave me no hope. And we spent a lot of hours, well, my mum spent a lot of hours doing a lot of research trying to work out the best options for me. And unfortunately, Australia was very limited when it came to options. She found an incredible place in America. And the funny thing was, I always wanted to go to America, not so much now, but, always wanted to go to America. And she found this recovery facility that wasn't rocket science. It was the difference, or the point of difference was, instead of working, on just the things that weren't working, they were working on the body as a whole and their mindset. So the practitioners and the physios and exercise physiologists, their mindsets were completely different to what we were experiencing in the hospital setting. It was that we don't know. Instead of just flat out saying no, it was, we don't know. So let's just throw everything at you and take it from there. And that was groundbreaking at that vulnerable time, because, I was in a place where everybody wanted better for themselves. Like, there would be 30 other people training in this facility, and everybody was there because they wanted to get better. Nobody was there because they didn't think they could. Everybody was there because they believed that they could. And that in itself, at such a vulnerable time, like, I was 7.5 months post-injury, a week out of hospital, and mum and I, like, I was completely paralyzed, and here's mum and I, like, getting on a plane and going across the world. I don't know how my mum did it, but like I said, she thrives under chaos, and wheeling into this place was like wheeling into a whole new world. But I remember just looking around going, like, this is exactly where I need to be. And it was hard because we had to fundraise each time to go over there. So I went over there 3 times. By the time I'd finished, I walked out unaided. And when I say walked, I could kind of take steps, which was huge. But every time we would go over there, we'd have to start fundraising while we were there to get back. Like, mum was selling her car, all of the community were hustling to raise money. But every time we were there, we'd meet more and more Australians that were doing the same thing, but Australians with families, small children, and we would just say, like, why? Like, why are we doing this? Why are we having to fly across the world, to be able to access these really simple things? So, we, after the 3rd time of coming back from this facility, we just put a call out to our community and the people that we knew. And, we had a couple of media contacts, and we said, this is what we want to do. We want to open a facility. We have no idea how we're going to do it. And how this all actually started was, I went into an outpatient appointment at the hospital that I'd spent, almost 8 months in. And I walked in with a walking frame. And I walked through the same gym that I'd, been in for 8 months, seeing the same doctor who told me just to give up and accept what had happened to me. And, now walking, I went, well, I told you so, and him just smirking. But I looked around the gym and I saw the same thing that I was seeing every day in that hospital. And it was, instead of the person having all the care was going towards, like, fixing the wheelchairs, and, the priority wasn't the person. And I said to mum, I said, we've got to do something about this. Like, we've got to open a facility. We've got to do something. And I remember mum going, like, with what money? With what money? And then I reminded mum that in the early days of me being in the hospital, she said to me, because the spinal ward, or the spinal rehab ward, is below what's called the Mallah ward, which is like the stroke ward. And we would share a communal kitchen with that ward. And I remember crying one day when mum wheeled me into the kitchen, and, mum said to me, well, she was just, trying to make me feel better. And I said, I'm actually not crying about my situation. I'm crying because, these people don't even have the mental capacity to make decisions for themselves. And mum said to me, well, your body might be broken, but at least you still have your voice. And so I said to her that day that we walked through the gym, I said, well, we don't have money, but we've got our voice. And, you give us a microphone and people will tell us that we don't need a microphone. We're that bloody loud. So I said, let's get out there and use our voice and let's see what we can do. You know, fast forward almost 3 years later, we had fundraised, we'd built a gigantic community of people who wanted to support our endeavors. We built family, you know, through the community. And most importantly, we built a facility. And we've just, well, our facility's been open for 11 years this year.
Wow.
And we've just, my partner and I and a group of my friends have just spent the weekend expanding our facility. So we've actually just built onto our facility next door, and it's been the most rewarding but exhausting thing. I did it because I needed a place to continue my recovery. Like, first and foremost, it was for selfish reasons. But, you know, also because ultimately my community needed somewhere to recover as well, and they needed options. And we sacrificed everything we had to get that place, you know, off the ground. My family remortgaged their home to pay wages, you know, like it's been a huge process being a not-for-profit, especially a not-for-profit that to this day is not recognized by the medical profession. But we're coming into a time now where the next step, my facility, we've just been recognised as the Victorian rehab specialist for the stem cell clinical trials for spinal cord injury recovery. So, you know, we can't not be recognised for what we are doing. And that means a cure one day, potentially, for the spinal cord injury community. And that's something that I never even dreamed of in the early phases of having a facility. I never thought that that would even be an option.
Well, from being told that you were never going to get out of bed, you know, stuck in a different country, like to where you are now, it's actually just incredible in so many ways. And, you know, Rhiannon, something that really dropped in for me while you were talking about the feeling that you had when you first stepped into that facility in the US, like it felt like hope.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, hope is actually a really big part of the 12-step recovery community, which is what I'm a part of. In fact, step 2 is all about finding hope again. And I think once we can find that glimmer of hope, no matter what our journey is, it makes such a profound impact on whether or not we are going to actually be able to live a life in recovery and be happy. Like, what role has hope played for you in your own journey?
I think without hope, we've got nothing. Like, that's as simple as it is. And I think it's the saddest part of vulnerability is when there is no hope on offer, because even when you don't have options, hope should still be an option. And even to this day, you know, I take hundreds of phone calls from families who are going through that early process of the hospital system. And like I said, there's a stock standard list of information or prognosis that you're given when you go through this journey. And that is the worst case scenario. And I have families crying to me on the phone, and they say to me, why? Like, why can't they just say they don't know? You know, and I say to them all the time, I say, well, because they don't believe in hope. They haven't found hope yet, you know? And I say, if you can't have anything in the situation that you're in, have hope and find that hope in any form, you know, like even if it means reaching out to me, like I'm happy to be that hope. And the reason why I do what I do to this day is, you know, 16 years ago when I was lying in that hospital bed, I just wanted somebody who had gone through this journey to say, this is what's going to be shit about it, but this is what's going to be really good about it, and not sugarcoat anything for me. Because for me, that would have given me hope at a time where I had none. So now, if that's what I can do for someone, if I can take someone's phone call, be it 12 o'clock at night, I will, if I can give them some hope. That's all I need. That's all I needed to come from this, was to be able to provide that, because having that slight bit of hope is what saved my life. Hope has saved me through so many different traumatic experiences and situations in my life, like from my divorce to the breakups to different kinds of grief. You know, in my darkest times, I can now say, like, if I have a little bit of hope, if I can see just the slightest bit of light somewhere, that's what I'm going to cling on to. And that's going to be the tidal wave that helps me ride into the next season of my life.
That's so beautiful, Rhiannon. And it's such a beautiful place to wrap up our conversation. And I think it's really going to resonate with the people who tune into this podcast. So I really thank you for that. There is one final question that I have for you, though, and that is, what are your 3 non-negotiables that allow you to live your life today happy, authentic, and free?
Easy. Boundaries. Boundaries are one of my biggest non-negotiables in all aspects of my life, from family, friends, business, you name it. And it's something that I've had to not only learn, but take away the guilt of having them as well. Because, you know, I know sometimes when I say to people, no, I can't be available for this, or even, you know, I've got some huge boundaries when it comes to my mum as well. And I think I must sound like an absolute bitch. But then I think to myself that if it means that I get to have tomorrow, you know, and I can move into whatever I'm doing next with clarity and ease, then those boundaries are absolutely worth it. And I think being in this relationship with Ben, that first 6-month period, I had a lot of, I need to set these boundaries. Oh my God, I'm a bitch. And him reassuring me that no, boundaries are what actually helps me live. Just conversations around, I have to have these boundaries because the way that my body functions is very, very different to how, you know, somebody who doesn't have this injury body functions. Basically, without boundaries, I don't have life. So boundaries, 100%. Gut instinct. Because I think that is a woman's absolute superpower. There has never been a time in my life when my gut instinct has been wrong, but there's been too many times in my life where I haven't listened to my gut instinct, and has led me, you know, into very interesting situations and circumstances. So gut instinct, absolutely. And my animals. Yeah. My animals are my therapist. I mean, I have a therapist, but my animals are the most grounding, sacred, greatest loves of my life. And they are my absolute non-negotiables. Whenever somebody says to me, if you had to take one thing, you know, with you, I would say they are my one thing. Yeah. All 8 of them, or however many there are. They are my one
deal. Yeah.
I do not know how people do not have pets. I get so angry when I see, you know, posts on social media where people are trying to rehome their animals because they need a new home or something like that. I'm like, how?
Yes, I get it.
Take my animals, I don't go.
Yeah.
Like, I would have moved to America in those early stages of my recovery in a heartbeat, but I had dogs, and I meant that they would have to, you know, live in a kennels for 6 months. Like, couldn't do it. So yeah, I love that.
So boundaries, absolutely. Gut instinct, I agree with you 1000%. And then your beautiful animals, your 3 non-negotiables. I love that. Thank you so much, Rhiannon. If people want to track you down, follow you, where should they go?
Rhiannon Tracey, My Real Life, across all the platforms. That is a safe space that I've created. And now I'm moving into a more slower space, which is our little urban homestead. If you want all the animal spam, all the plant and gardening spam, it's all over there.
I'll make sure that I link both of those or all of that information in the episode show notes. We say here on Behind the Smile that when we recover loudly, no one needs suffer in silence. So thank you so much for being a part of the show and for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you so much. It was so great meeting you.
Likewise. See you later, Rhiannon.